How does one define the concept of Yuri? I first became aware of the game Yuri Chess when Juliette Lemieux gave a presentation at Showcase Zero about a year and a half ago. Lemieux is a multifaceted creator. They're a podcast host, they're a game designer, and they even made a Pokemon ROM hack of Friends at the Table's Mall Kids mini arc. If you're a fan of my work in particular, it was Lemieux that first gave me the idea to analyze We Are But Worms one word at a time. Suffice it to say, I'm a big fan, but when I watched their talk at Showcase Zero, they blew me away with their latest creation. I like to tell people that I used to be a top 100 chess player in the country when I was 9, so I'm always intrigued when people adapt chess into their own tabletop games. There's Jian Shim's The Snow Queen, Sean Patrick Kane's Fake Chess, and its Not Safe for Work expansion, and I've even covered Takuma Okada's Chess Two Kingdoms on the channel before. But I broadly understand those games on a conceptual level. As Lemieux explained their newest piece, I found myself struggling to grasp a critical component, one that eludes me as I write this script. Though I admired Lemieux's take on a 3-player, asymmetrical version of the classic game, I was somewhat confused by a notable absence in Lemieux's definitions of game concepts, a gap that was not filled when I read through the text itself. What is Yuri? The game puts Yuri in the title, and several notable passages refer to the concept, but there exists no glossary or definition of terms. That said, I've made my fortune analyzing games, trying to figure out their hidden intentions and secret agendas, and Yuri Chess will be no different. I now go forth to reverse engineer a solution, to spin gold back into straw, and uncover this hidden truth. To fully understand Yuri Chess, we must first understand chess itself, and examine how one of the world's oldest board games impacted Lemieux's design process. Chess was initially conceived in India, sometime around the 6th century. It became something of a mark of nobility and education to be an adequate chess player, and even today chess playing is regarded, falsely, as a sign of intelligence. Many movement rules have persisted through the last 1500 or so years, though the square-hopping elephant and the slow-moving minister have been replaced by our bishops and queens. In fact, the queen as standard nomenclature for the piece took some time to be codified. H.J.R. Murray's A Short History of Chess states that, in India, the piece referred to as a minister, mantri in Hindi, became the Arabic firs as the game made its way to Persia. As chess spread northward, from Spain into Western Europe, both the placement of the minister beside the king, as well as Firs' feminine gender, led to the piece transitioning into the queen we know today. I bring up the history of chess as a way to forefront in the viewer's mind 2 things. First, the rules of chess have always been malleable, changing between cultures and continents. And second, chess has always been a game of war, a game inspired and played by rulers and nobles. Even the ancestor of chess, Chaturanga, translates into the army game. And keeping in mind chess's interest in power, who wields it and who seizes it for one's self, one would do well to keep in mind one of the game's oldest rules, that of pawn promotion. Pawns have basically always been the weakest piece in the game. To call someone a pawn today is to designate them a disposable tool. But even as far back as its earliest incarnation, a pawn might make its way to the end of the board, and ascend into something greater. Yuri Chess itself maintains many of the rules of what we'd consider standard chess here in 2025. But its differences are meaningful, and we can glean much of the game's philosophy through what they imply. To begin with, the board itself is altered. The H-file and 8 rank are sanded off, leaving a 7x7 grid the designer describes as intimate. The board is also tilted. Players face off across a diamond instead of a square. This dramatic shakeup of the battlefield both constrains player choice as well as cognitively reframes the game. This is not chess as you knew it, but something different, something more straightforward and bloody. In Yuri Chess, pieces can be captured on the first turn, something that cannot be accomplished with the standard rule set. This text is interested in all-out struggle. A defensive game is practically impossible. The most important rule change in Yuri Chess is its alternate win conditions. While red wins in the standard way, by checkmating one of the other kings, black can only win if a king captures another king. It's deceptively simple, but mechanically profound. Those are the lone win conditions, and thus they introduce a level of complexity to the game that surpasses its foundation. Chess is not a game designed to handle asymmetry. It is a classic of board games precisely because it is perfectly balanced. The only major mechanical advantage in the entire game is given to white, who makes the first move. Everything else in chess is a matter of skill, of pitting your own mastery of the rules against your opponents. You defeat their king before they can defeat yours. But by creating asymmetrical win conditions, you completely throw off the balance of power. Black is in a terrible position. They must somehow simultaneously defend their king, defend white's king, and defend red's king, ensuring all three pieces do not somehow end up in a checkmated position, while at the same time using what little strength their army of 8 possesses to force the other kings closer together. Meanwhile, red is in a relatively easy position. They often win on accident, since the inclusion of a third player dramatically restricts the avenues a king is permitted to move. Furthermore, they even win when their own king is checkmated. It seems nearly impossible to win Yuri chess playing as anything but red. But while black is in a virtually impossible position, white is actually, textually, unable to win this game. Lemieux simply did not give white a win condition. White's king is just as valid a target for checkmate. Its pieces are just as capable of swinging the tide of battle to one side or the other. But no matter what plays out on the field, no matter how many white pieces are sacrificed or promoted, white cannot achieve victory. So now we are presented with 3 sides: red in the strongest position, black at a disadvantage, and white, who by all accounts should have no skin in the game at all. Why send your soldiers to die if you have no hope of winning? In her honors thesis, Game Theory and the Metaphor of Chess in the Late Cold War Period, Thirza van Hofwegen writes that, quote, "In game theory, the players will behave in rational ways, have well-defined goals, and will exercise a certain freedom of choice, albeit within certain predetermined limits," end quote. Players want to achieve their victory objective, and will take steps to make that possible. While the fun of games is watching how people of various skill levels use different strategies to achieve such an end, very few people intentionally play a game with the hope that they will lose. But Yuri chess, in its asymmetry, has created a problem for game theorists. Though all sides possess complete information about what the other players are capable of, including their win conditions, the inclusion of white as a rogue actor introduces a level of uncertainty not present in standard chess. While all players understand what is needed for black or red to win, there's no in-game method of addressing what white will do, no mechanical lever the other players can pull to balance the scales in their favor. This begs the question: how do you play a game you cannot win? A few years ago, I read a paper from the Office of Strategic Services, the predecessor to the CIA. This paper is titled Simple Sabotage Field Manual. Released in 1944, its purpose was to inform Europeans in Nazi-occupied countries about simple ways to resist their enemy. It is not a manual which provides information on guerrilla warfare tactics, or how best to create an improvised bomb. Instead, it provides a much subtler education, one meant for civilians trying to survive under a hostile regime. I'm sure you've seen articles detailing advice to refer all matters to committees, or how advocating caution and reasonableness is actually a great way to slow down organizational progress. I'm thinking about this paper in the context of Yuri chess because they both have something in common. The intended audience of the field manual was a group of people whose war was over. Their nations were occupied, their workplaces converted into assets for the Third Reich's military machine. They could not win their fight in a meaningful way. This is the situation of the white player, because white, by simply not having the ability to win, becomes a threat. Because though white cannot win, they can ensure their enemies lose. I already established that the black position is the weakest of the 3, but that weakness comes from lopsided win conditions. Positionally, red is at the greatest disadvantage. It is penned in on either side, open to attack from both black and white. Its pawns will never promote. They have to go through 3 files of pieces to reach the end of the board. All it would take is a little collusion. Perhaps white neglects to defend its right flank, focuses all its attention on red, allows the disadvantaged black to acquire queens that are so painfully absent at the start of play. It is in red's best interest to play nice with white, because if white so chooses, red's smooth path to victory becomes much rockier. But again, there's no mechanical way to get around that. Rules as written, white is simply a wild card. This is where the social element comes in, where outside the context of the game, it is beneficial for red to flatter and appease white. Professional chess frowns on this kind of metagaming. You're not really supposed to shit-talk your opponent once you've both sat down. But for red and black in Yuri chess, you must by necessity play diplomat. Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War that when backed into a position from which they could not escape, soldiers would fight to the death, and so it was best for generals to engineer situations in which the only outcomes were annihilation or victory. This is why diplomacy is so critical for red and black, why white, despite being unable to win, is actually the most powerful player. When you have nothing to lose, you might as well go down swinging, inflict as much suffering on the enemy before the end. It's with this idea in mind, that of losing a battle as dearly as possible, that I returned upon promotion. White could play the game of niceties, accept red's flattering overtures, or stand in solidarity with black. But they could flip a kill switch, pour sugar in the gas tank of their opponents, and make their pawns everyone's problem. Certainly, white could throw their pawns at red immediately. Or, white could slowly advance on the right flank, little by little, until both players realize white intends to be a problem. Now both sides will need to utilize their resources, expend energy managing a new foe while simultaneously combating their neighbor. It doesn't change the fact that white can never win, but it does illustrate with perfect metaphorical clarity how those with little power can, with time and determination, become weapons of mass destruction. Perhaps this is where Yuri Miyazawa, author of the science fiction series Other Side Picnic, and a parent student of the Yuri philosophy, draws his themes. Other Side Picnic takes a lot of inspiration from the 1972 novel Roadside Picnic, which contemporary audiences will best recognize as the source material for the Stalker video game series. When Lemieux cites Miyazawa's concept of a Yuri of absence, the devastation wrought by nuclear weapons, the chasm war leaves in its wake, are surely close to their thoughts. The 1961 U.S. Army Guerrilla Warfare and Special Operations Field Manual defines resistance as, quote, the active opposition of one individual or group to another. A resistance movement is the organized element of a disaffected population which resists a government or occupying power with means varying from passive to violently active. Resistance movements begin to form when dissatisfaction occurs among strongly motivated individuals who cannot further their cause by peaceful and legal means, end quote. From this definition, we can draw a clear line to the themes of Yuri chess. Black and red act as occupying forces, grand players in a game in which white mechanically has no stake. I think a lot about the proxy battles of the Cold War, in which the USSR and United States danced around the globe, ruining nations in their struggle for ideological supremacy. One can easily read Yuri chess as having been influenced by this history, with white portraying the civilian populations of various battleground states. If black or red were able to enlist white in their schemes, then we could absolutely compare white to a paramilitary branch of a conflict, akin to the Viet Cong or Contras. But the last line of the definition of resistance stands out to me beyond obvious Cold War parallels. Individuals who cannot further their cause by peaceful and legal means. This is true for the white player of Yuri chess. Peace is obviated by the nature of chess itself. As I've said before, there's no mechanical path to white victory. Peaceful and legal resistance has been made impossible, so there's only one logical conclusion for the white player, and that is to ruin everyone's day. Taking all of these facts about Yuri chess together, its asymmetrical design, its alterations of the traditional chess layout, its historical inspirations, and the thorny position it places the white player, I believe we are now ready to answer Lemieux's riddle. We know this game is interested in taking established rules, both of chess and past conflicts, and repurposing them. We know the text is deeply interested in the difficulty of games that are unbalanced, ones with intentionally complicated win conditions that force players to think outside the box and move past conventional means of play. Most importantly, we know the game has placed one player in both the weakest and strongest position, one in which they cannot win, but one in which they also hold the power to decide the game's outcome, even if it costs them everything. What can we deduce about Yuri from this knowledge? Yuri is fluid. From the board's tilted axis to its shaved file, we can see that Yuri is unique, but still an adaptation of what came before. It has ancient roots, but evolves over time. Elephants become bishops, ministers become queens, and chess becomes Yuri. Yuri is strength. Not only is the game impossible to complete without bloodshed, but the game seems to relish it. Why does Lemieux tighten the kill box? Why must each player struggle to achieve differing win conditions? Because, like its historical inspirations, Yuri Chess is a war game, one which seeks to teach its students that no struggle is clean or easy. To return again to Yuri Miyazawa, Yuri may be likened to, quote, the zone of complete air superiority patrolled by an AC-130 gunship. It's kill or be killed, end quote. Miyazawa lays out his guiding ideology explicitly as one in which you must strive to become stronger. One must be cunning and ruthless, in equal measure, to succeed at this game. Yuri is a philosophy of dominance. At the same time, Yuri is both about exercising and resenting control. While Red uses its strong starting position as leverage over their opponents, White is the clearest example of what unfettered force pushes people toward. While the rules of chess compel players to seek resolution outside the bounds of the game, its mechanical constraints give you no option but to coerce, bully, and step on your enemies' throats. Yuri is a double-edged sword of kneeling in submission while reaching for the dagger in your boot. The last line of text in the game reads, "You technically know everything you can do. What's new are the consequences." This final thrust sums up the danger inherent in the ideology of Yuri. This is nothing less than a call to arms, a defiant bellow. If Yuri Chess is a game about spitting blood as you raise your broken body from the dirt, then Yuri itself is that part of the human spirit that would rather set itself on fire than allow that body to endure the humiliation of obedience. It is better to bring agony to everyone, to make them, whoever your personal them might be, bleed. Thank you to everybody for watching. I really appreciate people who take the time to see what I'm saying about tabletop games. I want to especially shout out Juliette Lemieux and Caro Assertion, who I consulted for help with writing this essay. In particular, I want to shout out Juliette because I think they are just a really funny and smart creator. I highly, highly recommend people check out I'll Be Pod for Castmas. It's just a great show. The names of the people who make these videos possible are scrolling by right now. If you want to become one of those people who helps me keep the channel going, you can join my Patreon, where members will get access to all my games, as well as the option to vote on a special video for the end of the year. If you liked this video and want something else that's, pretty unhinged, that's going to be the best way to help throw your vote in. So I'll put that poll up probably sometime in June or July. My background picture is Liquefied Image by Adriana Unsplash, and my profile picture is by Eater Outsider on Tumblr. If you want to find more of my work, I'm at AAVoid on Blue Sky, Monster Factory Fanfic on Tumblr, but my main site is aavoid.com, where I talk about games and writing. I also do a podcast that's Mortified the Friendship Quest, where me and my friend Layla do critical media analysis. Around the time that this video goes out, we'll have talked about Limbo, which I think will be a really interesting conversation. Thanks to everybody for watching. I think my next video will hopefully be somewhat Star Wars related, so we will see how that goes, but I'm very excited for it. So until then, see ya.